The alien cowboys burned human books, until a war hero read one aloud. The flames reached 20 feet into the evening sky above Redemption Creek, Arizona territory, casting dancing shadows across the faces of the 6 alien beings who stood in a circle around the massive bonfire, their silver blue skin gleaming like polished metal in the hellish light. Each one held armloads of books, precious volumes that had been painstakingly carried across 1,000 miles of hostile frontier by settlers who valued knowledge more than gold, more than life itself. And one by one, they were feeding these treasures of human wisdom to the hungry flames. Captain Ezra Blackwood stood motionless behind the corner of the general store, his weathered hands clenched into fists as he watched centuries of human thought and creativity turn to ash and smoke. The leather-bound volume of Shakespeare that had belonged to the town schoolteacher, the medical text that Doc Harrison had used to save dozens of lives, the Bible that Reverend Matthews had read from every Sunday for 15 years, all of it disappearing into orange destruction at the hands of beings who had walked among the people of Redemption Creek for 3 years, without anyone suspecting their true nature. The leader of the alien cowboys, who called himself Seth Garrison, and had run the most successful ranch in the territory until this moment, raised his voice above the roar of the flames. His words carried harmonics that no human throat could produce, but the meaning was clear enough to freeze the blood of anyone who heard it. Let this fire burn away the poison that corrupts human minds and turns them from the proper path of obedience and simplicity. These books fill their heads with dangerous ideas, with dreams of worlds beyond their station, with questions that should never be asked. The other aliens nodded in agreement, their movements synchronized in a way that spoke of shared consciousness or telepathic communication. They had been living in Redemption Creek since 1885, establishing themselves as successful ranchers and businessmen, while secretly studying human society and reporting back to their superiors among the stars. But what they had discovered about human nature had apparently alarmed them enough to take direct action against what they saw as the greatest threat to their mission. Captain Blackwood had returned to his hometown just that morning, expecting to find the peaceful settlement he had left when he rode off to fight in the Indian Wars 5 years ago. Instead, he had found a community living in fear, where books had been declared contraband and anyone caught reading was subject to punishment that the town's new alien leadership termed corrective re-education. The people he had grown up with moved through their daily routines with the careful caution of those who had learned that curiosity could be dangerous. What the aliens did not know, what no one in Redemption Creek could have known, was that Captain Ezra Blackwood was not entirely human himself. His great-grandfather had been a member of a crashed alien expedition that had integrated into human society during the early days of westward expansion. And while Ezra appeared completely human, he carried genetic modifications that gave him enhanced senses, superior physical capabilities, and most importantly, the ability to understand and communicate with other alien species. The irony was not lost on him that he was witnessing one group of aliens destroying human culture while being part alien himself, someone whose mixed heritage had made him a better protector of human values than many pure humans had proven to be. His service in the cavalry had been motivated not just by patriotic duty, but by a deep appreciation for the human spirit that his alien ancestry had helped him understand more clearly than most people ever could. As the book burning continued and more precious volumes turned to smoke and cinder, Ezra made a decision that would change not only his own life, but the entire future of human-alien relations in the American West. From the saddlebags of his horse, he withdrew the one book that had traveled with him through every battle, every long night on the frontier, every moment when he had needed to remember what he was fighting for. It was a worn copy of Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, its pages yellowed and its binding cracked from years of careful reading and rereading. This book had been his father's most prized possession, passed down from a man who had believed that poetry could capture truths that no other form of human expression could reach. It represented everything that the aliens were trying to destroy: the power of human imagination, the beauty of human language, the capacity for growth and transcendence that made humanity worth protecting. Ezra stepped out from behind the general store and walked slowly toward the bonfire, his movements casual but purposeful. His enhanced hearing could detect the conversations taking place between the aliens in their own language, discussions about the efficiency of their book-burning operation, and their satisfaction at finally taking direct action against what they termed the human infection of intellectual chaos. When Seth Garrison noticed Ezra's approach, His pale alien features registered surprise, quickly followed by irritation. The alien leader had been expecting to complete his operation without interference from any of the human residents, who had been thoroughly intimidated by previous demonstrations of alien power and authority. "Captain Blackwood," Zeth said, his voice carrying the cold formality that characterized alien communication with humans they considered inferior. "You have returned at an interesting time. As you can see, we are conducting necessary sanitation operations to improve the mental health of this community. I trust you will not interfere with activities that are designed to benefit your entire species." Ezra continued his slow advance toward the fire, his expression calm but his eyes fixed on the flames that were consuming the accumulated wisdom of generations. "That's an interesting way of looking at it, Mr. Garrison," he replied, using the human name that the alien had adopted during his years of deception. "Though I can't help but notice that you're destroying property that doesn't belong to you, which where I come from is considered theft and vandalism." The other aliens moved to flank Ezra, their positions suggesting readiness for violence if their leader deemed it necessary. Their enhanced physiology made them formidable opponents for any normal human, but they had not calculated for the possibility that they might be facing someone whose own enhancement gave him capabilities they had not anticipated. Zeth Garrison's response revealed both his confidence in his superiority and his fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. "Captain, your species' attachment to these collections of printed symbols demonstrates the kind of primitive thinking that prevents you from achieving your true potential. We are helping you by removing the distractions that keep you from focusing on more practical concerns." It was then that Ezra made the choice that would transform the entire situation. Instead of arguing or challenging the aliens directly, he simply sat down on a nearby stump, opened his copy of Leaves of Grass to a page he knew from memory, and began to read aloud in a voice that carried clearly over the roar of the flames. "I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass." The effect of Whitman's words on the gathered aliens was immediate and startling. Their coordinated movements faltered, their synchronized consciousness seemed to fragment, and for the first time since Ezra had known them, they appeared to be experiencing individual rather than collective responses. The leader, Zeth Garrison, actually took a step backward as if the poetry itself was a physical force pushing against him. But Ezra continued reading, his voice growing stronger and more confident with each line. "My tongue, every atom of my blood formed from this soil, this air, born here of parents, born here from parents the same, and their parents the same. I, now 37 years old in perfect health, begin, hoping to cease not till death." What the aliens were experiencing for the first time in their long lives was the power of human artistic expression to transcend the boundaries between minds and touch something deeper than conscious thought. Their species had evolved beyond individual emotional experience eons ago, achieving a kind of collective consciousness that was efficient but sterile. They had dismissed human literature as primitive noise because they had no framework for understanding its true purpose and power. As Ezra's reading continued, other residents of Redemption Creek began to emerge from their hiding places, drawn by the sound of familiar words and the sight of someone brave enough to challenge their alien oppressors. Mrs. Patterson, the schoolteacher whose library had been the first target of the book burning, crept closer with tears streaming down her face as she heard poetry she had thought was lost forever. "For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you," Ezra repeated, and the words seemed to hang in the air between human and alien consciousness like a bridge that neither species had realized could be built. Zeth Garrison's reaction revealed the depth of confusion that the poetry was causing in his alien consciousness. "Stop," he commanded, but his voice lacked the authority it had carried just moments before. "These words, they create disorder in thought patterns. They serve no productive purpose. They must be eliminated." But even as he spoke, other members of his group were showing signs of something that their species had not experienced in millennia: individual curiosity, personal emotional response, the kind of internal complexity that made consciousness more than just efficient information processing. One of the aliens, who had been known to the townspeople as Marcus Webb, actually reached out as if to touch the book in Ezra's hands. Ezra looked up from the page and met Zeth Garrison's gaze with calm determination. "You're right that these words create disorder," he said. "They disorder minds that have become too rigid, hearts that have forgotten how to feel. Spirits that have lost the capacity for wonder. That's not a bug, Mr. Garrison. It's a feature. What followed was perhaps the most unusual literary discussion in the history of the American frontier, as Ezra found himself explaining to an increasingly confused group of aliens why human beings valued books that served no practical function and often made life more complicated rather than simpler. He spoke about imagination as humanity's greatest gift, about the way stories and poems allowed people to experience lives and emotions beyond their own narrow existence. He explained how literature preserved wisdom across generations, how it allowed the accumulated understanding of centuries to speak to contemporary problems, how it provided comfort in suffering and inspiration in darkness. But more than explanations, he continued to read, selecting passages from Whitman that spoke to the themes he was trying to convey: the interconnectedness of all life, the dignity of individual consciousness, the beauty that could be found in the most ordinary experiences when viewed through the lens of poetic attention. These are the thoughts of all men in all ages and lands. They are not original with me. If they are not yours as much as mine, they are nothing, or next to nothing. If they are not the riddle and the untying of the riddle, they are nothing. If they are not just as close as they are distant, they are nothing. The alien who had been known as Marcus Webb was the first to break ranks completely, moving closer to Ezra and asking in a voice that trembled with newfound uncertainty, What does it mean to celebrate myself? We have been taught that individual consciousness is primitive, inefficient, dangerous to social order. But these words suggest that individual consciousness is sacred, Ezra replied, closing the book but keeping it ready in his hands. That every person's experience and perspective is valuable. That diversity of thought and feeling is a strength rather than a weakness. Your people have achieved great things through collective consciousness, but you've lost something essential in the process. The conversation that followed lasted through the night and into the dawn, with more townspeople gradually joining the circle around the dying bonfire as they realized that something unprecedented was happening. Aliens who had been their oppressors were asking questions about human nature, human values, human dreams, questions that revealed how much they had failed to understand during their years of observation and study. Seth Garrison proved to be the most resistant to the concepts that Ezra was presenting, but even he began to show signs of the internal conflict that exposure to human literature was creating. The collective consciousness that had defined his identity for centuries was fragmenting under the impact of ideas that treated individual experience as valuable and meaningful. "You are destroying us," he said at one point, though his tone carried more bewilderment than anger. "These concepts, these ways of thinking, they make it impossible to maintain the harmony that has been our greatest achievement. Individual consciousness leads to conflict, disagreement, inefficiency." Ezra's response revealed the depth of understanding that his mixed heritage had given him about both human and alien psychology. "Maybe," he said, "but it also leads to growth, creativity, love, art, sacrifice, heroism, and a dozen other things that make consciousness worth having in the first place. You've achieved perfect efficiency at the cost of everything that makes existence meaningful." As the night progressed and the discussions continued, a remarkable transformation began to take place among the aliens who had come to Redemption Creek as observers and oppressors. One by one, they began to experience something that their species had not known for millennia: individual emotional responses, personal curiosity, the kind of internal complexity that made each consciousness unique rather than interchangeable. The alien known as Marcus Webb asked to hear more poetry, and Ezra obliged by reading from memory passages from Shakespeare, from the Bible, from folk songs and ballads that had sustained frontier communities through hardship and isolation. Each new piece of literature seemed to unlock additional aspects of individual consciousness that the aliens had not known they possessed. By morning, the situation in Redemption Creek had been completely transformed. The aliens who had begun the previous evening as a coordinated force dedicated to destroying human culture had become individuals struggling to understand concepts that their species had abandoned eons ago. The books that had been destined for the flames were being carefully gathered and preserved by townspeople who now understood their true value as never before. But perhaps most importantly, a new kind of relationship was beginning to develop between human and alien consciousness, one based on mutual respect and recognition of what each species could offer the other. The humans had gained protectors whose advanced capabilities could help them survive the dangers of frontier life, while the aliens had discovered aspects of existence that their own evolution had left behind. Seth Garrison, though still struggling with concepts that challenged everything he had believed about consciousness and civilization, proved capable of the kind of growth that individual awareness made possible. Over the following months, his transformation from oppressor to protector became one of the most remarkable examples of how literature could change not just minds but fundamental aspects of identity and purpose. The school that reopened in Redemption Creek under Mrs. Patterson's leadership became the first institution in the territory to offer education to both human and alien students, with curricula that included both practical frontier skills and the kind of literary appreciation that had proven capable of bridging the gap between species. The library that was established to replace the books that had nearly been destroyed became a center for ongoing dialogue about consciousness, creativity, and the values that made civilization worth preserving. Years later, as Captain Ezra Blackwood sat on the porch of his ranch house reading Whitman's poetry to a mixed group of human children and young aliens who had chosen to remain in Redemption Creek, he often reflected on the night when literature had proven more powerful than weapons in changing the course of history. The book burning that had seemed like an act of cultural destruction had instead become the catalyst for the most successful experiment in interspecies cooperation that either civilization had ever achieved. The aliens who had sought to eliminate human books had instead become their most passionate defenders, understanding through personal experience why literature was too precious to be destroyed by those who lacked the wisdom to appreciate its value. The war hero who had read aloud from a banned book had done more than save the literature of his community. He had demonstrated the power of human artistic expression to transform consciousness itself, to reach across the vast differences between species and touch the universal experiences that connected all thinking beings. In the end, the greatest victory was not military but spiritual, achieved not through force but through the simple act of sharing the accumulated wisdom and beauty that human beings had created across centuries of struggle and growth. The alien cowboys who had burned human books had discovered that what they were trying to destroy was actually what they most needed to become complete beings, and the war hero who had refused to let that destruction continue had given them a gift more valuable than all the advanced technology their civilization had ever produced. The flames that had once threatened to consume human literature had instead illuminated the path toward a future where different forms of consciousness could learn from each other, grow together, and create possibilities that neither could achieve alone. And in a small frontier town in Arizona territory, the sound of poetry read aloud had proven more powerful than armies in building bridges between worlds and hearts that had once seemed impossibly distant from each other.